and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast. This is your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, and the not visual but still audio, Evan Ginsberg. We'll figure out the tech issues probably next week. But this week I'm really excited because when you say Wrestling and Everything from Coast to Coast, we're not just coast to coast from California to New York, but now we've gone to way the heck to the other coast, and that's England, where we have Chris Tetreault-Blay. Did I get that right?
You did, spot on.
Wow, great. Not a usual, Smith or Jones last name,
I don't do things by halves. So
Good. And so I'm really thrilled to have you here from England. Now tell me, where in England are you at right now?
So I'm in a little town called Newton Abbot, which is in the county of Devon, southwest England. We find that not many people I speak to from your part of the world know this part of England or know it exists, because I think they know where the main cities are and everything, but we're sort of tucked away in the southwest corner where it's quiet.
Sure, there's a lot of country there that people don't always assume, and there's a lot of rural areas in England that a lot of people don't.
That's really where we are. So
nice. I just got to admit, I absolutely love England, and I've never been there, but my best friend growing up as a kid was from England.
Okay,
and I got so much British culture from him. I mean, we're talking, eating Weetabix, we're talking about the world's worst wireless show. He introduced me to like Monty Python when it was just starting out. I mean, we're talking, this is like 1972. So he introduced me, or 1976. He introduced me to Monty Python and Benny Hill, and it's all the crazy wacky stuff about Brits, because I do have a theory, and that is, and it covers people that are in New York too, by the way, Evan, which is there's a certain sort of insanity you get when you're stuck on an island. You guys are an island.
Yeah, we are.
Manhattan's an island too, and you guys go a little nuts when you're all stuck on the same piece of land together.
I never thought of it like that, but it would explain a lot. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I'm with you there.
So tell me about your background in professional wrestling and how you got started in your fandom of wrestling.
Wow, so we're going back to when I was 7 years old, so 1991. I got into wrestling.
Oh, now you make me feel old.
Oh, sorry. Shouldn't have given that away. It was through my older cousin, so he was 5 years older than me. And he was massively into it. I didn't know what it was at all. And he lives a couple of 100 miles away from where I grew up, so I didn't see him very often. But he came down to visit us a couple of times, and he brought his WWF videos and that. And I couldn't have been less interested, I think, when it first came about. He was showing me it on the screen. I was like, don't get it, not interested, we'll move on. Something clicked, though, and I did start to recognize some of it, get a little bit more interested from a distance, and something happened in 1991 which drew me closer to it, and I ended up being able to discover it for myself through, I didn't have Sky TV or anything like that, so I couldn't actually see it, but I got given recordings of the odd event here and there. We're talking 92, WrestleMania 8 sort of era. Magazines, trading cards, that kind of thing. It took off from there, to be fair, and that was my life from when I was that age, probably up till about 21. There was nothing else that really existed for me except wrestling, and I would even choose to stay in and watch wrestling over going out with my friends, which I look back on now, it's a little bit sad probably, but it's
Now, were you just watching the WWE, or did you get any of the other feds that were out, from the United States out there?
I knew of WCW. It was WWF to begin with. That's really all I knew. And then through my cousin, I realised that there was another one out there because he had the WCW Galoob figures and everything. So I started to recognise Sting, Lex Luger, those kind of characters. We didn't get WCW over here much. I think 92, 93, it was on one of our sort of terrestrial TV channels on a Saturday afternoon, but only for a limited amount of time, and then it kind of disappeared. So it was only through, again, videotapes that I was given that I was bought, because they did release the events over here on VHS. And I learnt about it through that. And it took me probably until about mid-90s before I actually had access to watch it when Nitro was on and that. But that was it. It was WCW, WWF. I knew of ECW eventually. I didn't get to watch much of it again because we didn't really have it. But yeah, but mainly WWF was the main one, I think. The WCW was that kind of... I went through a time where I preferred WCW, but I almost didn't want to admit it because it's almost like the red-headed stepchild, isn't it? He's like, if you're a WWF fan, you kind of feel a bit bad to be drawn to WCW.
Did they have ECW out there? Did you guys get that?
They had it again, I think, towards late 90s. One cable station carried it for a time. I think I only had access to it for about a year before I lost that. But I didn't. I read about it in magazines. We had some great magazines that produced over here, which delved into all the indies and was big on ECW. But I never was drawn to it, I suppose. I wasn't a fan of the Attitude Era when it came in because it really strayed away from that clean-cut product that I'd been brought up with. So I kind of saw ECW as it was just barbaric, and it wasn't my kind of thing at all. But, I kept...
Until the WWE started doing all that stuff.
And that's it. And I did, when I was living it, I look back at it now and I'm having a new appreciation for the Attitude Era in the late 90s. But when I was living it at the time, I didn't like it because it just strayed too far from what I enjoyed growing up. I thought a lot of it was becoming gratuitous violence and sexualized and that, and I was like, it's not wrestling anymore. But compared to what they have now, I'd happily go back and read it all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did you ever watch The World of Sport?
I didn't at the time. No, I missed out on that. I have heard about it through my grandparents and my parents because they were familiar with it and they used to watch it on a Saturday afternoon. I think it was on again. You ask anyone from that kind of era over here about wrestling and they will run off the same few names because obviously, Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks,
Adrian Street.
Adrian Street, there we go. Yeah. But no, I wasn't exposed to that. I haven't even really seen a lot of it. I've not gone back and watched a lot of it, to be honest with you. It was an odd style of wrestling. I think when you brought up on the American style and then you tried to go back, Lord Steven Regal, William Regal, when I used to watch him in WCW, his style made me uncomfortable.
Why was that?
I don't know. It just didn't seem to fit. Because he was obviously classically trained, very, very technical wrestler, almost to the point I found at the time, compared to the really colourful, bombastic American style, it was a little bit boring. Again, I appreciate it more now that I've got older and the art of it, but it just didn't seem to fit. But it almost made me want to watch him because his matches were so different than all the others. So it was one of those kind of weird, almost like a train wreck type thing. You can't look away when it's on. It's making you feel different about wrestling, but you don't know why. And but he had some great matches. He brought out some great performances with people he worked with in WCW in particular.
Evan, do you have any questions for our guest?
I have more of a statement.
Okay.
I think it's amazing. Chris is a Renaissance man. He is a podcaster. He is a writer. He's done children's books. He's studied psychology and sociology. And as someone who studied psychology, Chris, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what makes a guy spend 5 figures to see a mediocre WrestleMania? Or what makes a guy spend $400 to sit on top and not see the ring, not see the
you have to see it on your phone, which you could do
watch
anyway.
on your phone for $400. I really like to learn the psychology of that. Why is it that important for them to be there?
I don't know, other than to say that you have. I think what we all suffer from nowadays more than ever is FOMO. I think wrestling fans in particular they feel the need to be part of these big events in order to feel like they connected to it, or they can almost stake more of a claim to it than other people who aren't there. So yeah, let's shell out that amount of money to say I've been there. Apart from that, I don't know. I don't know why you would spend that amount of money to, you know, to be seated ringside. Firstly, that astronomical ticket price, or to even bother with getting the heavens seats and not see anything. I've never understood that.
Now, how long would it take for you to get to London from where you're at?
It's about 3.5 hour drive ish, 3.5, 4 hours.
Do you go to any events that are in London? Any WWE? When was the last live wrestling match you went to?
So I have been to quite a few more British indie shows around the southwest. So within about hour and a half drive of where I am.
That would be such a bucket list thing for me, is to see an indie wrestling show in England.
They are.
I've done that.
There you go. And there's plenty of them as well. When I started my podcast in 2020, quite soon I was falling into interviewing guys on the British indie scene in the southwest because they were more accessible, and just the promotions popping up all over the place at that time. It's got a real growth. In terms of major shows that I've been to, I've only ever been to one, and it was the WWF One Night Only event in Birmingham in September '97, which was the night that Shawn Michaels beat the British Bulldog for the European title. So that's about a 3-hour drive from where I am now. But yeah, I've just not been driven. Again, maybe the pricing has put me off a bit. It's like I can't, because I don't appreciate the current product as much or enough to make that commitment, to make that journey, to spend that kind of money. I've not been pulled to go and see them, for quite some time.
Yeah, well, it is a commitment, and as Evan pointed out, even in the United States, where we have all these matches all the time, WrestleMania, even for just mediocre cards, we see that there's several $100s for just basic seats, way up at the top of the arena, and don't even think about like what it's going to cost to get a T-shirt or a hot dog. Or a beer or anything like that.
I go to a lot of. I'm a heavy metal fan along with my wife, and we go to a lot of gigs, and that's mainly what we're doing this year. Is all we've not got a holiday, but we're going to a lot of gigs, and I know the amount of money that's costing now, especially when you're there. Yes, T-shirts, merchandise, food, whatever. All of these big live events seem to have you over a bit of a barrel now. Once you're there, you're a captive audience, and they can charge what they like, which I think is wrong. I don't think inflation has gone anywhere near what the prices that they're charging now. But it's all part of the experience, I suppose. Yeah.
See,
but
now,
Chris,
go ahead, Evan. Go ahead.
I think it's a little different if you go to an indie wrestling promotion or an indie music gig. For example, there are great bands like Fishbone who are still on the road, and when you see a band like this, it's like a mobile flea market. They have everything imaginable because you can't afford to take a dozen musicians on the road, but you have to supplement it with the T-shirts, with the CDs, the DVDs, the gimmicks, the merchandise, and I don't have any problem supporting. I'll happily spend the money at a gig, or in fact, I went to a comedy show the other day, and the first thing I was looking for the merchandise table, and they didn't have one. So I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with a $1 billion industry, trying to vacuum dollars out of your pocket like WWE and TKO and UFC. When you're saying you can have a beer with Hulk Hogan for $9,500, I just think it's despicable. That's a whole different. That's coming from a whole different place.
Sorry, we can't translate all of these into euros for you, but it's
still
9,500.
It's a lot of money in any currency.
Yeah, I think, especially if we're using WWE as an example, I think they they know there are people out there who are spending that money, which is, so they're like, for the amount of people that turn around and say, actually, no, I'm not going to spend that, they know that there's an audience out there who will, and they'll just appeal to them. So I don't know, there doesn't seem to be the sense of loyalty anymore that I kind of got a sense that you get at a local indie show, or like you say, the, you know, a more local indie gig, and that there's that connection with the artists as well. You know, they may be there selling their own merchandise, and you can go there, you can meet them, you can talk to them, and that is probably more of an experience that I enjoy now, rather than just going, sitting in the seat, and then coming away again.
Absolutely, and those musicians are getting exploited, you know, by the streaming services. You know, you could have 5 million clicks, and you're making a couple of bucks, and you know, it's absurd. I know that as an indie filmmaker, you know, what a view pays, and it's literally pennies for the most part, depending on the platform. So again, I'm happy to support indie wrestlers, and even GoFundMe's and such for artists in need. But here's my question to you, and again, as an eclectic Renaissance man who has an interesting life.
Thank you.
There's so many wrestling fans that's all they know. They have no other interest.
Yeah.
But you have 2 kids, and I'm reading more and more parents saying, I hate to look my kid in the eye and say I can't afford to take you to WWE. I don't have. For example, I'll give you numbers. The last Madison Square Garden WWE house show a few months ago, and that pay-per-view house show was $63 to $1,010 a ticket. So do the math. If you have a wife, a husband, and 2 kids, just the tickets alone, before the gas, the parking, the food, the merchandise.
Yeah. And for you, it's a 3-hour drive on top of it.
And a 3-hour drive.
Yeah.
So as a father, how does it feel to have to look a kid in the eye and go, I just can't do this. I'm sorry.
Or do they care? Do your kids even care?
Well, see, that's it. I mean,
I'm making a general statement. I'm not.
I think I do feel that. I mean, they are big. They've not jumped on the wrestling bandwagon. I'm hoping to change that, because I'm taking them to their first wrestling show in June. So that'll be interesting to see if they spike some interest after that. But they're big into music, so if I use it against that kind of example, it's like we took them.
Is it an indie show, or is it an indie show, or a WWE show?
That's an indie show. Yeah. I've been invited.
May I ask what fed it is?
Yeah, so it's Slam Masters Wrestling, who are based up in Wales, and they've got a big show in Cardiff. And one of the owners, a guy called Jonathan Walker, I've spoken to him for my podcast before, and when I restarted it, he got in touch and he said, look, if you ever want to come up and see one of the shows, and then, you know, he can come back on the podcast and talk to me about it. So I'm dragging the kids up for it as well, whether they like it or not. But we took them to see their most favourite band in the whole world at a gig last weekend, which is one of the reasons I was in London. And
what band was that?
This is Ghost.
Okay, I saw you have all those Ghost T-shirts.
Yes, there you go. So. Yeah, so that's.
Have they ever performed in the United States?
Yeah, they're pretty huge over there now. They've been together for they're celebrating their 15th year, and I have a feeling probably for about 10 years or so of that, off the top of my head, they've probably been touring over in America as well. But they are huge now compared to what they were sort of when we first got into them. But we've sort of said to them, we've taken them to see them for the first time 3 years ago when they were over here, and testing the water. They hadn't been to a gig before, so it was a big, you know, kind of a risk for us, but they loved it. And then we felt bad for not being able to take them since. But so we've said to them this year, we'll take you. This is almost in place of a holiday, you know, because we can't afford to do everything. Luckily, they aren't ones who are into loads of different bands, so they wanted to go see everyone. It's this one band. But if I was not able to, you know, if we got priced out of it and I just had to say, actually, I'd love to go, there's nothing else stopping us, but it's the price, I would hate that, because I didn't have those experiences when I was a kid. But I almost don't want them to I want to give them what I didn't have, you know, and I want to give them all these memories. And you know,
How
we
old are
found
they? How old are your kids?
they're 11 twins. So
Guess what
yeah,
we have in common?
you got twins? Well, you are twins.
13-year-olds.
Oh
Boy,
really?
girl, boy, girl.
Yeah, same.
I looked and I said, they really look like they could be twins, but I didn't want, you don't always want to embarrass yourself by
Yeah, they
saying,
are.
oh, one's older than the other. But I have boy, girl twins,
Yeah.
13 years old, so they're almost the exact same age as
Yeah,
yours. What a trip. And how
nice.
exhausting was it
Yeah,
to be,
God. See, I
you're
didn't know.
someone that can relate.
Yeah, I didn't know any different. You know, the only we haven't had any others. You know, it's just them. So
Yeah,
I did.
no, we only wanted one kid, and so
Oh, there you go.
we always point out to either child, we only wanted one kid, and we won't tell you which one we wanted.
Right.
You know,
See, we always said we wanted two, and we wanted a boy and a girl, and you can't plan these things, and then it happened all at once, so it's brilliant. But yeah, nothing prepares you for the tiredness. I've never felt anything like it.
our kids didn't sleep for the first 2 years that they were born,
Oh,
and so it was like one would go to sleep and the other one would be up. So it was like having one child that was up for like 22 hours a day, basically.
yeah, exactly.
And we didn't sleep for the first 2 years, and it wasn't easy. I'll tell you, it
No.
wasn't easy. So I definitely feel, but that's great that you're that close that you want to be able to take them to these things and have them experience that.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, wrestling was my life when I was growing up, and I really didn't do anything else. I didn't do much socially because I mentioned to Evan actually after we finished recording for my show earlier in the week that I've discovered lately I got really big into wrestling when my parents split up. So I have almost started to think that was my escape from the life that I was trying to be distracted from. And I didn't want to pull away from that. You know, I made it my thing because that's where I felt safe. And I saw what it did to me socially because I chose to stay in by myself with my wrestling videos, magazines, figures, whatever it was, rather than go out and see people and make friends and everything. I almost want to take everything that I did or didn't do or that I did wrong and make sure they don't. You know, they have all these experiences. You know, to say we've taken them to see Ghost now twice by the time they're 11. They're going to see Iron Maiden next month as well.
Nice.
You know, so if you'd have said to me at that age, you know, I could have gone to like 5 wrestling shows by the time they would, you know, I was their age. I'd be over the moon with that.
Take them to see George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic, and that's the litmus test. You go, if they appreciate that, you know they have good ears.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Okay, I'll have to remember that one. Yeah.
If they're on tour in England anytime.
Oh yeah. Oh, they play everywhere.
I'll keep the eye
now, it's so different in the United States because to get to another country takes a lot of work. You know, I mean, either to get to Canada or to get to Mexico, takes a lot of work. But you can go to France, you can go to, you know, Germany and all that stuff. Have you gone to see any wrestling matches outside of England?
No, I haven't. It's on my list. And the more I've spoken to other wrestlers recently from over here, and I've been talking about their bucket list items, it is for them to want to perform in different countries as well. So I think that's one thing that wrestlers and fans have in common. They would want to sample sort of the international. I would have loved to have been able to go over to the US. I know a lot of people who go over for WrestleMania now, and that is almost like that's their big holiday every year. But there's some great, you know, wrestling Japan or over in Europe, and that there's some fantastic shows in promotions that you can go to. But no, haven't yet.
You haven't been to the United States yet either.
No, never
I'd wait a few years. I'd wait a few years before you come out here. We're unfortunately, anyone that doesn't have that isn't born in the U.S. is not getting treated so nicely here, and that's not my fault. I didn't vote for him, but
my sister's just emigrated out there actually a few months ago. She now lives in Lubbock, Texas.
Oh boy, that's
really right wing.
Yeah,
that's
as red state as you can get.
Austin's an interesting town.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, but it's something that you would like to sometime come to the U.S. and
absolutely, yeah.
Because I'll say this, Brits love San Francisco.
Okay.
How much time have you spent in London?
Me, oh God, I try to avoid it. Would you believe? I grew up about 45 minutes an hour outside of London, so when I moved down here, it was a lot different. The city lifestyle and the big town lifestyle wasn't really what I wanted. I wanted something a bit quieter. So I've tried not to go to London unless I absolutely have to. But I've been there quite a lot over the years. I'll say that.
There's a huge British contingency in San Francisco because apparently San Francisco is a lot like London. I've been to London,
Oh,
but
okay.
everyone says they say it's London with better weather. That's what.
Which does, yeah, that's a winner anyway. I would say because there's nothing worse
London's
than.
like Manhattan.
Sure, yeah, as I said, because you're stuck on an island and everyone goes insane. But so I've had the pleasure of managing one British talent, but he's a significant one, and that is I managed Nigel McGuinness,
Oh wow. Okay.
and for a match, and he was great. He
That's
was
very cool.
really a wonderful professional, and so
Mm.
I kind of wanted to get back to like you talked about the WWE style being bombastic,
Mm.
and I find that an interesting word. First of all, because half of our listeners might have to look that up, and as to what it means. No offense, listeners. No, you all are smart marks, but uh, our view of England from the United States. I'm not talking for everybody in the
Yeah.
United States, but we look at you guys as two batches. One is we look at you as the stiff upper lip, like serious,
Mm.
like very button down conservative types,
Yeah.
and then we look at the soccer hooligans,
Yeah.
and we really, I mean,
Yeah.
there's the Guy Ritchie style,
Yeah.
heavies, of the heavy Cockney accent and the
Yeah. Kind of the London mafia type
yes,
people.
yes, yes.
Yeah, I know
So
the
there's
ones.
there's that there's that huge sort of dichotomy. And since you're a psychology guy, can you explain how you Brits go from that stiff upper lip to the guy? The best
I
thing I can describe is the Guy
yeah.
Ritchie hooligan. How does how
I
does
wish
how
I
does your
could.
country create both of those personalities? And how do you deal with it?
I don't know. I mean, again, for like me, you get away from it. I suppose whichever one you don't like, you get away from. What I would say is, yeah, you very rarely find Brits that are both. You are one or the other, and I would say the football hooligan type ones are kind of the grittier ones. I suppose it's all down to upbringing, isn't it? It's, like everywhere out there, everywhere over here has its good areas and bad areas, and I think you are shaped by what's around you, and particularly if London, it's got a lot of rough areas, and you'll see a lot of the football teams over there have got the rougher, more violent, more enthusiastic fans. I'll say that. But yeah, I don't know, to be honest. It's all nature, I suppose. Nature, nurture, that kind of thing. Which one wins out?
I've always been
Uh,
fascinated by that. That's
yeah,
the way that life is in England. And, I'm a huge fan of the Beatles,
yeah,
and I'm a huge fan of the Ruddles. I mean,
mhm,
whatever it is, there's something about like the British mentality where it is so, because it's so buttoned down. I think there's that other side where you burst out of that buttoned down personality, and then you come up with some of the most creative and
mm,
outrageous stuff because you want to break away so much
yeah.
from that. I'm a huge fan of Andy Partridge and
Oh, okay.
XTC,
Yeah.
and his music really is like taking slices out of British life and handing it to us here in
Mm,
the United States. I mean, if you really listen to all the stuff that Andy Partridge writes,
mm,
it's just he really injects you
yeah.
into the British way of living and British life. And I don't know if you're really into XTC or if you ever listen to Dukes of the Stratosphere.
I
If you've ever
haven't.
heard of
No, I haven't.
that was their fake group that Andy Partridge made up, and
Okay.
it's very super psychedelic and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at like the psychedelic era of the 60s and
Mm.
things like that, and it wouldn't have developed in such a way if England hadn't gotten involved in it.
That's
America
interesting, actually.
America's really into it, but I think we
Mm.
looked to England as like the cue to be able to get us to start thinking psychedelically. It wasn't just the United States. If England hadn't brought it to us and really delivered it to us in the way that it had, with the whole Paisley invasion and
Yeah, yeah.
and all of that. And I mean, I live in San Francisco, so we had the Haight-Ashbury district, but I feel that like we were hand in hand with what the British were doing at the same time.
Yeah.
And their psychedelic era and all that stuff, and it's always fascinated me. It's always been just something that
I think a lot of it. I mean, I don't know if it just goes for Brits. It probably goes for populations everywhere. But there is a lot more people, a lot more population over here are like, this is me, take it or leave it. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. This is why we've got such like comedy greats, because they found an avenue to let this other side of them out, which basically just says this. I'm not going to be told what to do, what to think, what to say. This is it. And, if you like it, brilliant. If not, move on. And that's where we've got such genius that just, music and, comedy writers in general.
in your comics. I'm a huge fan of 2000 AD and Judge Dredd. I love Judge Dredd because I can tell you this. Nobody in the world can make fun of the United States as well as the Brits can. You guys see right through us, and you call it. You just call Alan Moore. He just calls the United States for exactly what it is, and he has no qualms. He's not afraid to say that we have no clothes and that we're a bunch of idiots. And Judge Dredd, I think, is one of the most brilliantly written comic books, and I'm a huge comic book fan and love Marvel and everything. But I've been reading Judge Dredd since the moment he came out in the United States, because you guys called so many things that we're going through right now, even.
Yeah, and you probably find as well that because we do that to ourselves, Brits, again, every country can probably lay claim to that they do this, but I think Brits really know how to take the mick out of ourselves. And people think we take ourselves too seriously. I don't know. I don't think all of us do, and we're quite happy to be like, yeah, you know what, we've cocked up here. We're not great at this. The weather's rubbish. That kind of, but we're almost proud of that because it's just become what we're known for, and we don't really care. We can't change it. So we're not everyone's cup of tea, as they say. But there's
now
someone out there.
You know that in the United States, you come here with a British accent, everyone thinks that you're A, refined, and B, will buy anything you're selling. You know that in the United States that we have British folks on advertisements all the time because people think that if a Brit is selling it to us, it's going to be refined and cultured and all this other stuff. But if it's just someone with, no offense, Evan, with a Brooklyn accent, you're like, who buys anything from anyone with a Brooklyn accent, right, Evan?
Well, actually, when I go to California, people go, you have a New York accent. So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. For us, because we have so much space between everything, and the time that you can get from California to New York, you could be like in Russia pretty much,
Yeah.
And so it's such a big difference to drive all the way across the U.S. and everyone's technically the same country and speaking the same language, but once you get to the South and everything, you realize it's not the same country and not everybody is speaking the same language.
And you get that over here. There's so many different. Each area has got its own accent and dialect, even, and such a small country, and to have that many different pockets of people, you go up to Scotland, and a lot of people don't really understand what the Scots are saying a lot of the time because their accent's so thick. But you get up there, and there's even different degrees of that accent, how thick it is, and it's what I love about over here. Really, is you only have to drive, say, an hour down the road, and it changes.
But what I was going to say is that wrestling out here, is almost like a common currency. You know, despite where you are in the United States, there's always wrestling. And so wrestling kind of brings us together in a way and unites us, you know, especially in that like 80s, 90s time when you were watching patriotic wrestling was a big thing for the United States. How did you guys view our ultra patriotism as portrayed by people like Hulk Hogan and Lex Luger and so on and so forth?
Honestly, when I was watching it and there was all that, it felt a bit fake. It's because we're like, you know, because I'm not patriotic to the point that I am proud to be British and I will, you know, shout from the heavens that it's, you know, it's the best thing to be British and we've got so much that we've got to be proud of. At times it's, you know, we've done things that have been a bit embarrassing to say that you're a Brit, to be fair. But I think in the wrestling world, it was okay when one or two of them were doing it. But then when you get so many of them, it's like, come on, not everyone feels like this about their country, surely. Guys like, for example, to use Lex Luger as a good example here, it was believable, I suppose, when someone like Jim Duggan and maybe Hulk Hogan were doing it. But when they tried it with Lex Luger, it didn't work because it didn't seem genuine. And I think by that point, we've kind of almost been fed too much of that. It just didn't, you know, having another real American hero to cheer for over here, at least, it didn't really do anything, you know, to float our boat by that point. But yeah, no, I think it looks a bit disingenuous.
Interesting.
Yeah, whether it is or not, I don't know. You know, it may be completely. That's how you all feel in that. I suppose we're just a bit more reserved, I suppose, with that. You don't get many wrestlers out there. British Bulldog was, fair enough. He used to fly the flag and everything like that, but he was never really outwardly, you know, getting UK champs going and things like that. I think, you know, he just kind of like, I'm a Brit and that's that. But, don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the British Bulldogs. I still think they're one of the best tag teams that I ever saw in my entire life. It's just they didn't stay together long enough, and they didn't, you know, make their impression in on WCW. They're not like the Road Warriors, where Road Warriors went and won stuff in both the WWE and WWF and WCW. You know, I think that. Why do you think that the British Bulldogs just couldn't stay together long enough? Was it really the Dynamite Kid was just too volatile, or what? What was your thought there?
From what I know, and I'll give a shout out here to a guy that I know over here, a writer called Steve Bell. He's written an amazing book called Dynamite and Davey, which at the time, and it probably still is, one of the only books out there that is written about them, about their story collectively. And there was that. I mean, they didn't get on towards the end by the looks of it. And Dynamite was, his temperament and everything, his reliability was a bit volatile. I don't know. I think once you've got that within a team and you can't really stay together between you, you're just not getting on. The magic goes in the ring as well. You know, I don't think there's very few that can actually carry that through. But it is a shame that they didn't. Whether their style was almost going back to the whole British, you know, how it made me feel to see, you know, Lord Steven Regal wrestle all these American ones with his style. Whether they were either just didn't fit or they were too ahead of their time. Especially with Dynamite. I mean, his style didn't really. It was the first time I've ever seen anyone do anything like he did. It's a shame they imploded like they did, because it would have been nice to see them get success. Whether they would have had success in the NWA and WCW the same, whether they would have used them the same. I think had they been in the NWA late 80s, where I think nobody could touch the tag team scene they had at all. I think on paper, and then it was one of the best. You know, you had the Road Warriors, the Horsemen, the Freebirds, and that. I think I would have loved to have seen them in that.
Oh yeah, Horsemen against the British Bulldogs would have been great. The Russians against the British Bulldogs would have been amazing. That would have been amazing. But Evan, you got another couple questions for our guest?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Chris about his writing. Tell us a little about your writing.
Oh, thank you, sir. So I am I'm mainly a horror fiction writer now. I haven't done anything for quite a while. I got first published in 2015. Just came out of nowhere. I've always enjoyed writing without realizing it. I wrote some fairly good stuff at school, you know, even though it felt like I wasn't enjoying it, I had to do it. What came out was quite good by all accounts. It was just something I just decided to do when my wife found out she was pregnant. I had so much going on in my head, I didn't know what to do with it. So
I know how that feels.
There you go. It just started to. I needed to write my thoughts down, so I started to keep like a diary of what I was going through. It was going to be like a diary that I can give to him one day and say, this was me when I found out that you were coming along, and this is kind of who I was and what I was doing.
You ever see The Shining?
Yeah.
My diary would have been like the friggin' Shining, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, and writing over and over again. That's how my diary would have been.
So it's funny. I always say them that this gave way to me writing horror, and so I've always been a big horror fan since I can remember. And naturally, you know, I played horror games, Resident Evil, Silent Hill. I loved video games like that. I watched horror movies, listened to heavy metal music. The darker kind of side of life always appealed to me. So that came through when I was starting to write, and I had some stories going on that I thought, I'm just going to jot these down. And eventually they came together, and I had a book out of, you know, 3 of the ideas became my first novel. So I've written 5, off the top of my head, I think it's 5 horror novels. 3 of those are in a trilogy. One's a standalone, and then one was the first part of what was to be a new trilogy until my writing kind of went to the wall a bit during COVID, and I haven't found my way back properly to that. But I've also on the side done 2 children's books as well, like Evan mentioned earlier on. So completely the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah, I was going to say horror and then children's books. Wow, that's pretty wild.
I started writing. I was doing some interviews when I first got published, and the question that kept coming up is there a genre that you would like to try your hand at? And I was like, yeah, I would love to write a children's book, because it's the most honest audience. You know, if they don't like you, they don't like your story, they're going to tell you. So you'll soon know if you've got a hit or not. And it was through the kind of books I was reading to my kids, these kind of rhyming. I don't know if you guys know Julia Donaldson over there at all. Room on a Broom, The Gruffalo. I don't know if she's big over there as she is over here. It's kind of their stories, but they're written in rhyme, and nice. They've got a really nice kind of rhythm, kind of cadence to it. And I loved reading those as a parent. So I wanted to do the same. I wanted to write a story that the parents would enjoy reading as much as the kids would enjoy hearing it. And I've always wanted to be a songwriter, so I've always tried to rhyme stuff, and it just came really naturally round about that time that this idea came to my head about a moth who wants to fly to the moon because he thinks the moon, he's drawn to the lights obviously, but he thinks the moon is a big light, and he tries to he wants to try and fly to it, and it just kind of went from there. And I went with it. I found a publisher who took on, and we did 2 books in those Little Brown Moth kind of series, and it's something I can say I've done. I haven't again gone back to it for various reasons, but it's therapeutic.
Now, have you ever thought about maybe being involved in an independent wrestling federation, maybe doing booking or something like that? You know,
it's a fleeting thought just crossed my mind. As much, because I've had a bit of an on-off relationship with wrestling probably over the last 20 years. So I went to university when I was 21, and I was convinced I'd grown out of wrestling by then. So I sold everything.
Evan hasn't grown out of it, and you're still waiting for that, Evan, aren't you?
I don't think you do grow out of it. Quite clearly, because I've all these times when I've tried to kind of convince myself it was something from my childhood, and I don't need that anymore. I keep coming back. So when I started podcasting again, it really reignited my love for it, and I've been trying to find avenues of getting involved, and I would love to my creative efforts to good use in the wrestling world.
I think I have the solution to all of this, Chris.
Go on.
In recent years, there's been multiple indie horror films with wrestlers and famous wrestlers, and And I think you could combine the two and really put together, but do something that's not schlock, because a lot of the films that I've seen have not been great. I mean, campy and fun, but you know, it wasn't Clyde Barker
And
or
a lot
Steve.
of wrestlers are
No.
good actors. A lot of wrestlers are good actors because they're
Yeah,
used to
Piper,
it.
Piper and They Live. That's not horror. That's more sci-fi. They Live was great, but
It was good. Yeah. I mean, you can kind of, a lot of people would say to some degree all wrestlers are actors because of what they're doing and doing promos and that. Yeah, just you're doing lines. You are
They know how
living
to do
a character.
stunts. They know how to do
And that as
stunts.
well. Yeah, absolutely. It's just I'm not sure why some of them just the ones some of them that have tried and failed. They just not had the personality outside of their in-ring persona, I suppose, to kind of grow into any more roles. I'll probably get shot down, but obviously Hulk Hogan was he wanted to be a bigger star than he turned out in the movies. And then you look what The Rock's done, and he, I suppose, is a great example of someone who has got it right. He hasn't had to wander too far from himself, but he has kind of adapted into.
Dave Bautista is a
yeah,
guy who knows how to act.
I haven't seen a lot of his stuff. I've seen is it Cabin in the Woods? Not Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the Woods. Yeah.
Was it, yeah, that one he did.
Check out him in Knives Out. Check him out in Knives Out.
Okay, I've heard.
He's very good. He's
Okay.
very good.
There's a film called The Last Showgirl, and of all people, it's Pam Anderson and Dave Bautista. And if anybody told me 5 or 10 years ago that I would be raving about how good an actress and actor they both are, I mean, it's a great film, and got all kinds of nominations and awards. She's a 57 or 58-year-old showgirl in Vegas, and she's like hanging by a thread. Her life's a disaster, and the show itself is closing. And Dave Bautista's her boyfriend, and there's no action scenes. It's just pure acting. And the guy, he's a tremendous actor. I was stunned. Very vulnerable, and he's actually slimmed down to the point he looks like a different person, because I think he wants to be looked at as an actor and not a action star. And I think
quite
it's
a difference.
He's not a kid anymore. How long are you going to be an action star? So
I'll have to check him out, because I keep forgetting really how much he has done. Obviously, the obvious ones spring to mind with Guardians of the Galaxy. I've never seen any of those, but I know obviously.
Here's the game plan, Chris. Here's my $1 million idea for you.
Well,
so you take a horror book, turn it into a screenplay, do a GoFundMe, get a bunch of British indie wrestlers and actors, a mix, and then get the 1 or 2 stars to help bankroll it, like a Batista. Because let me tell you, we have indie filmmakers who work with name actors and actresses. If the script is great, there's people that want to do great work. The Last Showgirl was a no budget film, and Dave Bautista was in it. So if you write a great enough script, you could have a legitimate actor or multiple. I'll give you a perfect example. Michelle Williams is in a film called Wendy and Lucy, shot on pennies, and it's the best film of this century. Wow. Watch Wendy and Lucy. Trust me, you'll cry your eyes out. It's a great film, great performance. I think she was nominated for Best Actress for it, if memory serves. Came out about 12 years ago. But you could get top actors and actresses in indie films if you have the right project. And you're young enough where you have time on your hands. You could put some stuff together.
I think horror has been given a little bit of a bad reputation, because there's so many bad. I'm all one for B movies, Z movies. I love great low budget horror movies, but I think there's some out there that aren't. They're so bad they're not good.
But the other side is horror is very marketable. You
Yeah.
could do something on a low budget and it could blow up. The guy that did the Terrifier movies, this guy was an ex-school teacher. He's clocking serious money now.
Yeah.
So
Actually, there was a festival over here only about a month or so ago, and it combined wrestling and horror. It was a wrestling and a horror convention.
This is what I'm saying.
They had Chris Jericho was there. They had some big names involved in the convention, and obviously you've got people like Tyler Mane. He's done both because he was obviously wrestling WCW, and then he's done a lot of films, especially for Rob Zombie and Halloween and that kind of thing. And I can never pronounce his name, but Robert Maye, is it? The guy was Kurgan, but then he's been in things like 300 and The Strain, and they were all there. So you've got guys that bridge. They're the guys that I need. Those kind of people, really.
So where do you see yourself in the future? What are your future plans? What do you want to accomplish in like the next year or next couple of years?
Yeah, if I've got my bucket list, items out there, I would love to. I mean, it goes on my writing, I suppose. Yeah, I would love to do something where I could make something of either one of my books that I've done, or write for something that becomes recognizable. I mean, that's the thing with being, an independent horror writer. You kind of get lost in the shuffle, and your work doesn't get, identified, recognized very easily. I would love to see, I mean, we've just been talking about it. I'd love to see, something I've done on screen. Yeah, it'd be great. But immediately, if we're talking like the next year, realistic, my podcast is really where my efforts are going. Apart from keeping my day job going and, having healthy, happy family around me. I'd love for my podcast to become a bit bigger,
So what you're saying is you don't want me as a guest, then?
Absolutely.
You want your podcast to be
I
bigger.
I need you as a guest. I need your energy to help sort of bring that back.
Actually, I'd be thrilled to do it. But believe it or not, we're actually at the end of the hour. I can't believe it. So quick. It moves by so quickly. But why don't you tell our fans how they could follow your podcast and follow you on social media if they want to?
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you. So my wrestling podcast is called Once Upon a Turnbuckle, and you can find me. I've got social pages for it on Facebook at Once Upon a Turnbuckle, on Instagram at Once Upon a Turnbuckle. My podcast is available on all major audio platforms: Google, Spotify, Apple, all those, and it's also up on my YouTube channel, which you can find. I've just changed the name of my YouTube channel actually, which is Dead Men's Tales and Turnbuckles, because I've had more than one podcast. I've done podcasts geared around my writing and sort of artistic. I've had like people on there, other writers, musicians, that kind of thing. So that's all on there as well as Once Upon a Turnbuckle. And I'd love to hear from people who have, either read my books, seen my podcast, anything. If you like what I'm doing, get in touch. I'm always engaging with everyone.
I have some friends who were scream queens, and I have some contacts in horror.
Might need to tap into your Rolodex there.
Yeah, and we have our guest Solomon Chertok, who's part of the
he knows
horror
everybody.
scene. He knows everybody when it comes to horror. Maybe
we'll
have to introduce you to him one of these days.
That'd be great. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So anyone, find me over there. They're the main port of call. I try to keep everything kind of under one roof now. I've had so many different pages for all of I've launched 4 different podcasts over the years, and it was really difficult to try and sort of manage them all separately. So I've kind of just brought it all together under those pages and that channel. So yeah.
Well, Chris, I've got to say that it was an absolute delight to have you on the program, and you're making me want to go visit England soon. I'd love to meet your twins. I'd love my twins to meet your twins.
There you go.
And of course, the invite is open that if you ever come to California, if you ever come to San Francisco, I'd be happy to show you around and be able to show you some of the.
I'll take you to 27 wrestling shows in 2 weeks if you come to New York. We constantly have wrestling here. It's like it's overkill, actually.
It's getting better. It's getting more over here. There's always some, there's a few big promotions around the Southwest, and they always seem to be overlapping and doing a load. So
I'm talking every weekend. We have multiple shows. New York,
that's
New
cool.
Jersey.
Yeah, I need to get out there. That's where I need to be. But I don't want to embarrass you or anything. I don't think I'll embarrass you on air, Evan. But
Oh, thank you for your support.
that's all right. I haven't dug into it yet. I've got a book that I'm beta reading at the moment that I need to finish that, but then I'm delving into that. I can't wait.
There's a photo of Solomon Chertok, who Russell just mentioned, and Scream Queen Debbie D in there.
Wow, okay.
She's a mutual friend of ours. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, it's been fantastic to have you on the show. And as I said, when you've run out of every single possible guest to interview, then think of me, and I'd be happy to do your show.
I will definitely just spot that for you, Russell. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Okay, we'll see everyone next week. Take care, and thank you for being on the show. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.